So imagine surviving breast cancer. You know, you actually beat the odds.
Right.
You go through all the surgeries, the radiation, the chemotherapy, and you finally ring that hospital bell, and supposedly you just go back to your normal life.
Like the battle is totally over.
Exactly. But then, the medication that is literally keeping you alive is causing you such agonizing daily physical pain that you actually start considering a terrible gamble.
Hmm.
You know, you find yourself wondering if you should just risk the cancer coming back just to get some relief from the side effects of the cure.
Yeah, and for millions of women, I mean, this isn't some hypothetical scenario. It is a daily, totally silent struggle.
It really is. And so we are talking about this brutal collision today between surviving breast cancer and navigating the really severe physical toll of medically induced menopause.
It creates a profound medical dilemma. Patients are basically backed into a corner.
Yeah.
They're forced to weigh the treatments that keep them alive against the treatments that actually make their daily existence livable. And the biological mechanics behind this trade-off are just incredibly unforgiving.
Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive. We're going to look at a very specific, very modern response to this dilemma.
Right.
We have a massive stack of sources in front of us today. We've got clinical guidelines from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, heavy oncology papers from journals, glossy medical clinic marketing brochures, and some pretty sobering regulatory safety notices.
Yeah, quite the mix.
Yeah, it's a lot. But the mission for this deep dive is to answer a really pressing and highly controversial question. Are these trendy new, quote-unquote, hormone-free intimate exosome therapies actually safe for cancer survivors?
And the contrast within your stack of sources is really what makes this so critical. Because we have to look past the confident promises printed on these high-end medical spa brochures, right? We have to dig into the raw, microscopic cellular biology.
Because the marketing is very persuasive.
Oh, absolutely. But the mechanisms at play here are so powerful, and when we apply them to a cancer survivor's body, the implications are just vast.
Okay, let's lay out the foundation of the problem first, just so we're all on the same page. The desperation driving women to seek out these therapies stems from a condition called GSM.
Right, Genitourinary Syndrome of Menopause.
Right. So when estrogen levels drop naturally as a woman ages, the tissues in the pelvic region undergo severe changes. They lose elasticity, they thin out, they lose moisture.
Yeah, and up to 50% of menopausal women experience this. It shows up as vaginal dryness, bringing frequent UTIs, and just really intense pain during sex.
But connecting this to the breast cancer population changes the scale of the issue entirely, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, there are over 4 million breast cancer survivors in the U.S. alone. And for that specific group, the rate of GSM jumps from 50% up to an astonishing 70%.
Wow, 70%.
Yeah, and the reason for that massive spike is directly tied to their life-saving cancer treatments.
Right, the anti-estrogen therapies.
Exactly. To prevent a recurrence of estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer, oncologists heavily rely on drugs called aromatase inhibitors.
Okay, I want to break down how those aromatase inhibitors actually work, because it really explains the severity of the pain.
Go for it.
So even after a woman's ovaries stop producing estrogen during menopause, her body still makes a tiny amount of the hormone in her fat tissue and adrenal glands.
Using an enzyme called aromatase.
Right, and the breast cancer feeds on that residual estrogen. So the drug just shuts down the aromatase enzyme completely. It starves the body of any lingering estrogen to basically starve the cancer.
And by creating that total estrogen blockade, the drugs artificially induce and massively accelerate the tissue deterioration we see in GSM.
This is not just regular menopause.
No, not at all. The tissue doesn't just become dry, it becomes incredibly fragile, inflamed, and prone to micro tears.
Ugh.
Yeah. The localized pain can become so constant and severe that it affects a patient's ability to just sit comfortably in a chair, let alone engage in intimacy.
And the sources highlight the terrifying fallout of this catch-22. We looked at data from a gynecologist at the Mayo Clinic, and her statistics show that up to 20% of breast cancer survivors on aromatase inhibitors actually abandon their medication prematurely.
Which is just a tragic statistic.
It is. The GSM symptoms become so intolerable that 1 in 5 women will willingly risk a fatal recurrence of breast cancer just to stop the pelvic agony.
Finding a safe treatment for GSM in this population is literally a matter of life and death.
Right.
Because if you can treat the local pain, you keep the patient on the systemic medication that saves her life.
But the standard treatment is a huge problem here, right?
Yeah.
Because for a woman going through standard natural menopause, Doctors just prescribe topical vaginal estrogen.
Right, you just replace the missing hormone directly at the site of the discomfort to regenerate the tissue. Simple.
But applying estrogen, even locally, is exactly what a breast cancer survivor is told never to do.
Yes, and the landscape around this is so fraught. We saw a really nuanced breakdown of this in a study out of Cleveland.
Oh, the one with gynecologic cancer survivors.
Exactly. They looked at women who had endometrial, ovarian, or cervical cancer. And the data showed that prescribing vaginal estrogen for those specific cancers was remarkably safe.
The recurrence risk stayed super low.
It did. But the landscape shifts dramatically when the diagnosis is breast cancer. The clinical guidelines from the UK point out a massive gap in our definitive safety data.
So nobody really knows for sure.
Well, some studies suggest that the amount of estrogen absorbed into the bloodstream from a topical cream is minimal. Some oncologists argue it might be an acceptable small risk if it guarantees the woman stays on her aromatase inhibitors.
Okay, but there's a flip side.
A big one. Other data sets indicate that for women specifically taking those aromatase inhibitors, introducing even trace amounts of vaginal estrogen back into the system could actively increase the risk of the breast cancer returning.
So if you're a breast cancer survivor and you're told there's even a fractional theoretical risk that the cream fixing your pain might bring your cancer back, you're going to look for a different option.
Absolutely. You're completely trapped. You can't use estrogen, but you can't live with the pain.
And this absolute desperation has created a massive, highly lucrative vacuum in the market. And right on cue, regenerative medicine clinics have rushed in to fill it.
Yeah, they see the fear surrounding estrogen, and they step up with incredibly compelling messaging.
I was looking at the marketing materials from some of these clinics, and they explicitly speak to cancer survivors. They advertise, quote, 100% hormone-free regenerative treatments.
Lasers, platelet-rich plasma, all of that.
Yeah, and the absolute newest trend taking over the aesthetics world right now, exosomes.
The allure of exosomes in these brochures is so potent. You see products branded with names like ExoFemale, positioned as this ultimate natural cure.
Right. The promise is that they'll promote natural tissue regeneration, rebuild the blood supply in the vaginal wall, completely avoiding hormones and surgery.
They frame it as a purely biocompatible healing process.
Okay, let's unpack the biology of what an exosome actually is, because the term gets thrown around a lot in these spa brochures without much explanation at all.
That's very true.
So an exosome is a tiny, nano-sized extracellular vesicle. They're secreted by mesenchymal stem cells, which are essentially the body's natural repair contractors. But the exosome itself isn't a living cell, is it?
No, it's not. They are essentially biological envelopes. When a stem cell needs to coordinate a repair job, it packs these microscopic vesicles with a highly specific payload of bioactive molecules.
Like what kind of molecules?
We're talking about signaling proteins, lipids, cytokines, which manage inflammation, and messenger RNA.
Yuck.
The stem cell releases the exosome, it travels through the extracellular fluid, docks onto a damaged target cell, and just dumps its payload inside. The messenger RNA then acts as a blueprint, telling the damaged cell's machinery exactly how to rebuild itself.
So if traditional stem cell therapy is like hiring a new contractor to come in and rebuild a damaged house, exosome therapy is just sending a massive group text message to the existing workers already on the site.
I love that analogy.
Saying, hey, stop sitting around, start building collagen and repairing this tissue right now.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. The clinics are harnessing the communication power of stem cells without the logistical risks of injecting foreign living cells into the body.
They just deliver the blueprints.
Exactly. They command the local tissue to undergo cell proliferation, meaning rapid division and growth. They also trigger a process called angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis, that's building new blood vessel infrastructure, right?
Right.
Because if your vaginal tissue is severely atrophied, thinning, and starving for blood flow because of those aromatase inhibitors, angiogenesis sounds like an absolute miracle.
Yeah.
You're physically rebuilding the blood supply to bring the tissue back to life.
And looking at those biological processes, proliferation and angiogenesis through the lens of tissue repair makes it seem like the perfect solution.
But there's a catch.
A massive one. The oncology research we reviewed forces us to look at those exact same mechanisms from a much darker perspective.
Here's the terrifying pivot in our deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, because the precise signals that tell damaged vaginal tissue to heal, divide, and build new blood vessels are the exact signals a microscopic tumor needs to survive, grow, and spread.
Wow. And the oncology sources reveal that cancer cells absolutely love exosomes, right?
Well, they don't just passively interact with them. Cancers actively hijack this entire cellular communication system for their own survival.
So how does a tumor actually use an exosome?
Well, in a tumor microenvironment, cancer cells behave like corrupt contractors. They manufacture and secrete their own malignant exosomes. They pump these corrupted messages out into the bloodstream to reach distant organs like the lungs or the liver
To do what?
to establish what oncologists call a pre-metastatic niche.
A pre-metastatic niche. So the cancer is essentially sending out microscopic scouts to prepare the soil before it plants the seed.
That's exactly it.
The corrupted exosomes arrive at the distant organ, deliver instructions to suppress the local immune system, and build a supportive environment.
Right, they lay the groundwork.
And then, when the actual physical cancer cells finally arrive months or years later, their new home is already built, totally undefended, and waiting for them.
The sophistication of that infiltration is just chilling. But the danger of introducing outside exosomes into a cancer survivor's body gets even more specific when we look at the concept of cellular quiescence.
Quiescence, that's a deep cellular sleep, right?
Yes. After a patient undergoes surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, it's very common for a few disseminated cancer cells to survive by going dormant. They enter this state of quiescence, essentially hiding out in the tissue, sometimes for decades.
But the mechanism keeping them asleep is really fragile.
Highly fragile.
The oncology literature indicates that exosome signals, specifically the kind of intense growth-promoting signals packed into these intimate regenerative therapies, can actually break that dormancy.
They absolutely can.
Hmm.
When an exosome docks onto the outer receptors of a sleeping cancer cell, it unlocks pathways that force the cell's nucleus to start copying its DNA again.
It gets that text message.
Exactly. It receives that grow and proliferate message, and the dormant cell wakes up.
Wait, so if a breast cancer survivor gets a local vaginal exosome treatment, could those exosomes theoretically migrate? Like, could they wake up a dormant cancer cell on the other side of her body?
Yes. Because these nano-sized vesicles are evolutionarily designed to travel and penetrate deep into cellular barriers. Injecting them locally into the vaginal canal does not guarantee they'll stay there.
Wow.
If they migrate through the heavily vascularized pelvic tissue and eventually reach a dormant breast cancer cell hiding elsewhere in the body, they provide the exact biological spark needed to reignite a full systemic recurrence.
That is horrifying. And if waking up dormant cancer wasn't terrifying enough, there's the issue of drug resistance.
This is one of the most alarming discoveries in modern oncology, frankly.
Yeah, the review details how exosomes can actually act as a biological shield against the very chemotherapy keeping the patient alive. They have the ability to transmit drug resistance from one cell to another.
Think of it like transferring the cheat codes for surviving chemotherapy.
Yo, that's a wild way to put it.
It's true, though. Researchers identified that exosomes carrying a specific type of genetic code, a microRNA called MIR221 or 2222, can drastically alter recipient cancer cells.
It acts like a biological software patch.
Exactly. When the exosome delivers this patch, it rewrites the cancer cell's operating system, instructing it to completely ignore the drug tamoxifen.
And tamoxifen is a foundational anti-estrogen drug that countless breast cancer survivors take daily to prevent recurrence.
Right. And the resistance transfer isn't just limited to tamoxifen.
Really?
No, exosomes can carry different payloads that rewrite the cellular machinery to survive major intravenous chemotherapy drugs too, like docetaxel and doxorubicin. They fundamentally shut down the cell's natural self-destruct mechanism.
So you could have a patient faithfully taking her medication, enduring the terrible side effects, only for an exosome signal to secretly disarm the drug's efficacy on a cellular level.
Exactly. You're rendering the life-saving treatment useless.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
Because I can hear a clinic director or even a hopeful patient pushing back against this entire premise. They'd say, but these intimate exosomes are derived from healthy stem cells, not cancer cells.
Right, the purity argument.
Exactly. They say these are from healthy, purified cells, so they don't contain cancer code. Shouldn't healthy messengers be perfectly safe?
It is an incredibly persuasive and intuitive assumption. I mean, if the source is pure, the outcome should be pure, right?
Right. Logically, it makes sense.
But a pivotal study published in the journal Anti-Cancer Research completely dismantles that logic. It proves that the origin of the exosome does not dictate how a cancer cell will use it.
Yeah, I was reading that Petri dish study from your notes. It was fascinating. The researchers didn't use corrupted tumor exosomes. They isolated exosomes from completely healthy, non-cancerous breast epithelial tissue.
The MCF10A cell line.
Right. Pure, healthy messengers. Then, they dropped those healthy exosomes into an environment containing aggressive, triple-negative breast cancer cells.
And what happened?
Well, I initially assumed the healthy signals might just be ignored by the cancer, or maybe even slow it down. But the cancer actually consumed the healthy signals, didn't it?
It's devoured them. The healthy exosomes massively stimulated the growth and migration of those triple-negative breast cancer cells.
That's just wild.
The researchers tracked the genetic response and saw a severe downregulation in the cancer's DNA damage response genes. Simultaneously, there was a massive upregulation of the MYC oncogene.
And an oncogene is essentially a gas pedal for cell division, right?
Yes. The healthy exosomes basically slammed a brick down on the cancer cell's gas pedal.
It's like dropping a crate of high-protein military rations into a dense jungle.
Oh, I like where this is going.
So the supply plane intends to feed the struggling local village, which, in our case, is the damaged vaginal tissue. But the guerrilla fighters hiding in the trees, the dormant cancer cells intercept the crate.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care that the food was meant for the villagers. They just consume the high-quality fuel and use the energy to mount a massive, aggressive attack.
Mm-hmm.
The cancer doesn't care about the return address on the envelope.
It really doesn't.
It just opens the mail and follows the instructions to multiply.
That analogy nails the biological reality perfectly. A growth signal is a growth signal. If there are stray, microscopic cancer cells left in a survivor's body, they act as opportunistic parasites.
They just intercept the healing signals.
Exactly. They will eagerly intercept the healthy regenerative signals meant to heal the pelvic floor and use them to fuel their own expansion.
Which really makes the confident marketing from these regenerative clinics so deeply troubling, especially when we contrast it with the actual regulatory landscape.
The contrast is stark.
Yeah, the glossy brochures make it sound like injecting exosomes is an established, completely safe, routine spa procedure. But the regulatory documents, like the patient safety notices and the UK guidance from Volt Pharmacy, paint a completely different picture.
The regulatory reality check is incredibly sobering. As of the data spanning our sources, there are 0 approved exosome therapies worldwide for this kind of localized regenerative treatment.
0. None at all.
None. They are considered entirely experimental by global health authorities.
Yet they are being aggressively marketed to a highly vulnerable population as a premium, out-of-pocket cure.
It's a huge problem, and the medical literature is explicitly clear on the contraindications. Bolt Pharmacy's guidance document specifically lists populations for whom exosome therapy is generally not appropriate.
And let me guess who is featured prominently on that list.
You guessed it. Individuals with a history of malignancy or those currently receiving cancer treatment.
Because of the unpredictable biological effects on cell proliferation.
Exactly. When you have a history of malignancy, the one thing you can never afford to do is introduce a chaotic, unregulated biological variable that aggressively promotes cell growth. The risk of inadvertently feeding a dormant tumor is simply too high.
And beyond the terrifying cancer-fueling risks, the sources highlight a whole host of other Wild West dangers. Because this industry is just sprinting years ahead of the regulators.
Oh, absolutely. The documents cite a severe lack of standardization.
Right. When a patient buys a vial of exosomes, they have absolutely no idea what concentration or purity they're actually receiving, do they?
No, it's a total guessing game. Furthermore, there are serious sterility and endotoxin risks associated with unregulated providers operating outside of rigorous clinical trials.
Because you're injecting biological material.
Exactly. You have to consider the physical procedure. Providers are injecting biological material derived from another human being's cells directly into a highly vascularized mucosal area of the body.
Wow.
Without robust pharmaceutical-grade manufacturing controls, the risk of microbial contamination is severe.
The sources also mention adventitious agents, right?
Yes, adventitious agents. These are microscopic stowaways, like unintended trace viruses or bacteria that tag along during the cellular extraction process.
And introducing those into a patient whose immune system might already be compromised from prior cancer treatments. I mean, that is incredibly dangerous.
It's a massive, massive risk.
When you look at the entirety of this deep dive, you really can't help but feel a deep empathy for the human element at the center of it all.
It breaks your heart, really.
It does. If a breast cancer survivor is in daily debilitating agony from genitourinary syndrome of menopause and she's desperate to stay on her life-saving aromatase inhibitors so she can watch her kids grow up, Of course she would pay any amount of money for a clinic treatment that promises a natural, completely hormone-free cure.
It sounds like the exact miracle she has been praying for.
Yeah. But the marketing preys on a very specific, deeply valid medical desperation.
And the oncology data we've unpacked reveals the devastating irony here. By seeking relief through these unregulated cellular messengers, these survivors might be unknowingly providing the exact biological fuel their dormant cancer needs to return.
It's a stark reminder that in the realm of cellular biology, natural does not automatically equate to safe.
Not all.
So just to bring all our sources together for you, GSM is a brutal, life-altering reality for the millions of women surviving breast cancer. And because traditional estrogen therapies carry incredibly complex, heavily debated risks regarding tumor recurrence, a booming, lucrative market of hormone-free exosome therapies has emerged to fill the void.
Right.
But while clinics market these treatments as pure, safe, regenerative miracles, the hard oncology data proves these tiny cellular envelopes pose a profound theoretical threat.
A very real threat.
They carry the exact molecular instructions that can wake up sleep cancer cells, transmit heavy-duty chemotherapy resistance, and just throw a brick on the gas pedal of tumor growth. And this happens completely regardless of how healthy or pure the original stem cell source was.
Which just highlights the urgent need for rigorously tested, safe alternatives for this specific population.
Yeah.
Because until the clinical trials actually catch up and provide definitive answers, the cellular communication network remains just too easily corrupted by opportunistic cancer cells.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Yeah, so we have spent this entire deep dive focusing on how exosomes accidentally act as the villain, right? We looked at how cancer hijacks them and how healthy exosomes inadvertently fuel tumor growth by delivering the wrong instructions to the wrong cells.
Mm-hmm.
But oncology researchers are always looking for the flip side of the coin. If cancer cells are so incredibly eager, so inherently greedy to consume exosomes, what if we use that appetite against them?
It is genuinely one of the most fascinating frontiers in current medical research. Scientists are actively trying to engineer exosomes to act like a microscopic Trojan horse.
Right. Think about it. What if we pack those exosome envelopes, not with growth signals or mRNA blueprints, but with a massive concentrated payload of chemotherapy, like doxorubicin?
Just load them up with poison.
Exactly. What if we send them directly into the bloodstream, knowing the greedy tumor cells will eagerly intercept and consume them, pulling the poison directly inside their own walls?
Is brilliant.
Could the very biological mechanism that makes exosomes so incredibly dangerous to cancer survivors today become the ultimate, perfectly targeted cure for cancer tomorrow?